You've probably experienced it before, that feeling when the wind howls, the rain pounds against your windows, and the sky cracks open with the force of 1,000 voices. The storm outside may seem like the only thing that's dangerous. But what if there's something more? What if, as the storm rages on, something within your walls is just waiting for the right moment to reveal itself? It's the kind of night that makes you second-guess every creak in the floor, every shift in the shadows. You may tell yourself it's just the storm, but deep down, you know, it's not. What if the thunder isn't the loudest sound in the room? What if the shadows, the ones you swear you saw moving, aren't what they seem? Tonight, we're going to tell you 3 stories that will make you question everything you thought you knew about the darkness outside and the terror that lives within, waiting for the storm to come. Imagine for a moment you're sitting alone in your house. The storm outside makes you feel small, insignificant in the face of nature's rage. But it's the silence that follows each thunderclap that makes your skin crawl. It's as if the storm itself knows it's not the only thing to fear. You're not just waiting for the rain to pass. You're waiting for something else. Something you can't see. Something that whispers on the wind. Something that waits for the moment you let your guard down. You try to ignore it. Tell yourself it's just the storm, just the wind. But what if it's not? What if it's something far worse, something that was never meant to be in your world? What if, right now, you're not alone? As the storm rages, stories like these unfold behind closed doors. They happen when you least expect them. When the weather is at its worst and the darkness outside closes in on you. These are not stories of monsters you can see. These are stories of the things that hide just beyond your sight. The whispers that grow louder, the shadows that move when you look away. Tonight, we won't be showing you ghosts or creatures from the depths. What we'll show you are the things that slither under the surface of the ordinary. Things you can't see but feel in the pit of your stomach, in the cold sweat on your neck. So as the rain begins again, as the thunder cracks above, I ask you, will you be able to tell the difference between what's real and what's waiting in the storm? Settle in. Grab a drink, maybe something to calm your nerves, because as the storm picks up and the thunder rolls closer, you'll want to be ready for what's coming. And trust me, once you start hearing it, you won't be able to stop listening. This is where the story begins. This is where your fear grows. So close your eyes for a moment, listen closely, and let the storm outside be your guide into the darkness of these true tales. Welcome to the storm. Story 1. The Whispering Walls. It was a night like any other. The storm was fierce, rattling the windows and making the house creak under its power. The wind howled, pressing against the walls like a force from nature itself, and the rain poured down in heavy sheets, battering against the roof. But tonight, something felt different. The house had always been old, the kind of house with history, with stories hidden in its creaking beams and shifting floorboards. But tonight, something felt off. The storm was only adding to it. The wind, the rain, the cold, creeping in from every corner. It all seemed to amplify the growing unease. I sat in the living room, the dim glow of a single candle flickering weakly against the storm outside. There was nothing unusual about the night, nothing at all, until the scratching started. At first, I told myself it was just the wind, maybe a branch scraping against the window or the house settling in the storm. But then, it came again. A faint scratching sound, like something trying to get out. I stood up, moved closer to the walls, pressing my ear against the cold plaster. Nothing. No sound. But the unease lingered. It was the storm, I told myself. Just the storm. But then I heard it again. A whisper this time. It wasn't the wind. No, it was far too clear. The whisper is faint, indistinct, but there, just beyond the edge of hearing, the soft murmur of something or someone calling out. I thought I imagined it at first, but as the minutes ticked by, the whisper grew louder. And then I heard the scraping again. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was nothing, just the house settling, the storm playing tricks on my mind. But it was no use. The noises didn't stop. In fact, they started getting worse. The scratching began to move, as if it was traveling through the walls, from one side of the room to the other, always just out of reach, always just beneath the surface. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. The wind picks up, howling louder now. The sound of scraping becomes more frantic, more insistent. There's an unmistakable shift in the atmosphere. Something in the house is moving. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that it was just the storm, just the house. But then I felt it, a cold spot. It wasn't just the wind, no. It was a sharp, biting cold, like someone or something was standing right behind me. I turned slowly, looking over my shoulder. The room was empty, but the feeling of being watched didn't go away. The flickering of the candle adds to the suspense, casting long, unnatural shadows against the walls. The whispering grows louder, and the scratching continues. I knew something wasn't right. It wasn't just the storm. It was something more. But what? That's when I saw it. The picture frame on the mantel shifted, almost imperceptibly, but enough to catch my eye. It wasn't the wind, I was sure of that. It was something else, something I couldn't explain. I approached the picture, slowly, cautiously. I wanted to look away, but something made me move forward. And then I saw it. The photograph was different. The faces of the people in the picture, they were wrong. Their eyes, they were looking right at me. Their expressions twisted in a way that didn't belong. And they weren't alone. There was a shadow in the background of the photograph, just barely visible. A shadow that didn't belong. I blinked, and when I looked back, it was gone. But the feeling remained. That presence standing just behind me, watching. I should have left the house, I should have run, but I didn't. I couldn't. Something was pulling me in, making me stay. The whispering in the walls was louder now, more urgent, like it was calling me, begging me to come closer. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to know what was happening. I had to find out what was behind all of this. I went up to the attic. The air was thick with dust, the wooden steps creaking under my weight. The door to the attic was slightly ajar, just enough for me to see the dim light inside. My breath caught in my throat. Inside the attic, the air was colder than it had ever been in the house. I could feel it in my bones. But there, in the corner, was something I hadn't expected to find. A journal, old and covered in dust. I opened the journal. The pages were filled with scribbled notes, desperate words like someone trying to warn me. And in the back of the book, there it was, a photo identical to the one I had seen downstairs. But this one was different. In the corner, there was a note, written in a shaky hand. "They're still here." I froze, my heart racing. I don't know what happened next. I don't know how much time passed. All I remember is the whispering growing louder, and then the door slammed shut behind me. I tried to leave the attic, but the door wouldn't open. I was trapped. The whispering was all around me now. It wasn't in the walls anymore. It was in my ears, in my mind, and I couldn't escape it. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the feeling that I was no longer alone. Was it all in my head? Was I just imagining it? Or was something far worse waiting for me in that house? What do you think? Was it the house or something else? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, the storm isn't always outside. Story 2. The Mirror's Reflection. 25 minutes. It was supposed to be a simple stop, a place to wait out the storm. I had no intention of staying long, but that night I found myself at the doorstep of an old, abandoned house, the kind of place you only hear about in whispers, a house that had stood silent for decades. But the storm outside had turned violent, and there was no other shelter for miles. The house was empty, or so I thought. The windows were shattered in places. The wooden steps creaked beneath my feet as I entered, and the smell of must and decay filled the air. Yet there was something in the atmosphere, something I couldn't place. It was too quiet. The storm roared outside, but the silence within was unnerving. I wandered through the rooms, the darkness pressing in around me. The wallpaper peeled away in strips, revealing the bare wood beneath. A thick layer of dust had settled everywhere, and yet something felt different, as if something still lived here, hiding in the shadows, waiting for me to notice. I made my way into the hallway, and that's when I saw it. A mirror, cracked and worn, hanging crookedly on the wall. At first, I didn't think much of it, just another relic of the house's long-forgotten past. But then, I looked closer, and I saw her. The mirror reflected the dim light of the storm, but as my gaze locked onto the cracked surface, I saw a figure standing behind me. A woman, pale and ghostly, her face obscured by the cracks in the glass. Her eyes, they weren't like mine. They were cold, empty, and they were staring directly at me. I spun around, heart racing, but the room was empty. No one was there. My breath quickened as I turned back to the mirror, expecting to see nothing but my own reflection. But no, the woman remained. Her form was faint, shifting with the reflection, but unmistakably there. I couldn't tear my eyes away. The figure in the mirror didn't move, but I could feel her presence, like she was right behind me, watching me. I stepped closer to the glass, my heart pounding in my chest. The woman's eyes followed my every movement, but she remained silent. The air grew colder, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. The lights flickered, and with each blink, the woman's reflection changed. Her mouth stretched into a smile, one that sent a shiver through me. I reached out to touch the mirror, my hand trembling as I brushed against the glass. It was ice cold, too cold, and that's when I heard it, a whisper. Soft, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. It wasn't the wind. No, it was her voice, coming from within the mirror. "Help me," she whispered, her voice echoing in my ears. I pulled my hand back, heart racing, but the voice didn't stop. It grew louder, more insistent. "You have to help me." I backed away from the mirror, my pulse pounding in my ears. I turned away, desperate to escape the sound of her voice, but the air felt thick with something I couldn't explain. The temperature dropped and a cold gust of wind swept through the house, even though every window was sealed shut. I knew I had to leave, but my feet wouldn't move. The mirror, she was pulling me back in. As I glanced once more into the reflective surface, something was different. The woman wasn't just standing there anymore. No, now she was moving. Her hand was pressed against the glass, her fingers stretching towards me as if trying to break free. Her face twisted in agony, her eyes pleading. I tried to run, I swear I did, but my legs felt like lead. The woman's reflection in the mirror began to grow, expanding until it seemed to consume the entire surface. The cracking in the glass deepened, the sharp lines of it stretching wider with each passing second. The woman's face, her expression changed again, but now it was no longer pleading. It was angry, terrifyingly angry. I stumbled backward, my eyes still locked on the mirror, and then, just as the thunder cracked one last time, the reflection shifted. The woman was no longer just in the mirror. She was standing behind me. I turned, my heart in my throat, but once again the room was empty. There was no one there. I turned back to the mirror, my breath catching in my chest, and that's when I saw it. The reflection in the glass wasn't mine anymore. It was her. The woman's face, pale and twisted, was now standing in my place. She was smiling, her mouth stretched wide, but it wasn't a smile of kindness. It was a grin full of malice, like she had finally claimed me. I reached out, instinctively trying to touch the glass, but my reflection, it wasn't me. The woman's fingers wrapped around my wrist, pulling me toward the mirror. I struggled, trying to break free, but it was as if the mirror was pulling me in, dragging me closer to the glass. I could feel the cold of it against my skin, and then I don't know how I escaped. I don't remember running from the house or how I made it outside. All I remember is the mirror, its cracked, broken surface, reflecting nothing but emptiness. But even now I still hear her. Sometimes when I pass a reflective surface, like a window or a mirror, I catch a glimpse of her. Her eyes locked on mine, her smile, and I wonder, was it ever just a reflection? Or was she always there, waiting for me to look a little too long, to stare just a bit too deeply into the mirror? I'll never know, but one thing's for sure. There's something about mirrors, about reflections, that we'll never fully understand. Something tied to the house, and to me. What do you think? Could it have been a spirit tied to the house, or something darker? What do you think it meant? Story 3. The Old Journal. I had been traveling for hours trying to find shelter from the storm. The roads were impassable, and I knew I wouldn't make it any further. That's when I found it. An old abandoned house sitting on the edge of the woods, almost as though it had been waiting for me. I didn't think much of it at first. The storm was too strong to consider turning back. I stepped inside, and the house seemed to welcome me with a cold silence. It was dimly lit, the only light coming from the flickering candle I found on the mantel. Everything felt frozen in time. Dust covered the furniture, and the air was thick with the smell of decay. It wasn't exactly comforting, but it was shelter. As I made my way through the house, I noticed a small wooden table tucked away in the corner of what seemed like a forgotten study. On top of it, there was a journal. It was old, bound in leather with yellowing pages that seemed to beckon me closer. The moment I touched it, a chill ran down my spine. The storm outside intensified, almost as though it was reacting to what I had just found. The journal was dated from the 1800s. I wondered who had left it behind, what stories it contained. I flipped it open, curiosity outweighing caution. And that's when I saw it. Entries that didn't seem to belong to someone from the past. They were written in a way that felt eerily present. The first entry was a simple one. The storm will come tonight, and with it, something will be lost. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, a writer's poetic musing on the weather. But the deeper I went into the journal, the more unsettling it became. The entries began to predict things I couldn't explain. The first one was vague enough to ignore, but then I saw the second. You will find a key on the windowsill. Do not use it. When I read that, I froze. Just hours before, I had found a small, rusted key on the windowsill. I had no memory of placing it there. The journal was eerily specific. Each new entry seemed to describe things that had already happened to me, things I hadn't even thought about in years. And the entries weren't just memories, they were predictions. They spoke of my next steps, things I hadn't yet done but the journal knew. I tried to ignore it, to rationalize it. The journal was just old, its pages worn and faded. But when I reached the next entry, I felt a cold sweat trickle down my spine. You will open the attic door. When you do, you will see what was hidden. The words were clear, precise. I hadn't even considered the attic before reading that, but now the thought of it lingered in my mind. I felt compelled to go upstairs, almost against my will. I resisted, but something in the journal made me take that first step. The entry had been too accurate, too specific. And soon, I found myself in front of the attic door, its cold wood staring at me like a mouth waiting to open. With a deep breath, I reached for the handle, and it turned with ease. Inside, the air was thick with dust. The wooden beams above groaned under the weight of years of neglect. But there, in the corner of the room, was something that shouldn't have been there. A box, old and faded, its contents hidden by time. The journal had been right once again. I felt the urge to open it, though I couldn't explain why. Inside the box, there was nothing but an old photograph. At first, I didn't recognize the people in it, but then I saw her, standing in the background just behind the group of smiling faces. She looked out of place, her eyes cold and staring, as if she were watching me. I dropped the photograph, and that's when I heard it. The whisper from the journal, echoing in my mind. You've seen too much. Now you are part of the story. I tried to escape, to run out of the house, but every time I moved, the journal called me back. I couldn't stop reading, couldn't stop looking. Each new entry was more terrifying than the last. The storm outside raged louder. The wind screamed as if it were warning me, but I couldn't stop. I was trapped in the pages, in the story. The last entry was written just moments before I found the journal. The words were chilling. You are not alone in this house. There is something hidden within these walls, and it has been waiting for you." I froze. The room seemed to close in around me. I could feel the weight of the house pressing down on me, as if it were alive, as if the walls were closing in. I turned, and for the first time I saw it. The shadows in the corners of the room, the flickering candlelight cast strange shapes across the walls. And then I saw the figure. A woman standing just behind me, her face hidden in the shadows, her cold eyes locked on mine. I could feel her presence, her anger, her sorrow. I had found what was hidden. I ran, I had to. I couldn't stay there any longer, but no matter how fast I ran, the journal's words kept echoing in my mind. "You're part of the story now. You cannot escape what has already been written." I don't know how I ended up outside. The rain had stopped and the storm had passed, but the air still felt heavy, as if the weight of what I had discovered was pressing down on me. I tried to leave, but I knew. The journal had already consumed me. The things I had seen, the woman in the shadows, they were all part of a story that wasn't finished. I looked back at the house, but it was gone. The place where it stood was nothing but empty land. I'm not sure if it was the storm or if I was losing my mind. But when I closed my eyes, I could still hear the whisper of the journal. "You're next." The last entry was just 3 words. "You're next." Story 4. The Vanishing Guests. It was supposed to be a simple evening, just a few friends over for a dinner party. The storm was only meant to be a minor inconvenience, something that would make the evening feel cozier. But as the wind howled outside and the power flickered in and out, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right about tonight. I looked around at my guests, trying to put the feeling aside. There was Sarah, always the life of the party, and Tom, with his quiet smile that hid something darker. And then there was Mark. He seemed distant tonight, more so than usual. They were all good friends, but something in the air felt different. The storm was growing worse, but the unease I felt was more than just the weather. As we ate, the storm outside raged louder, but none of us were really talking about it. Instead, we carried on with our conversations, trying to ignore the strange noises coming from the house itself. The creaking of the old wood, the rattling windows, the feeling of being watched. Then it happened. Sarah was the first to leave. She stood up from the table, excused herself, and walked toward the hallway, as though she'd forgotten something in another room. At first, I didn't think much of it, but when I went to check on her, she was gone. No sign of her anywhere. The door to the guest bathroom was wide open, but Sarah wasn't inside. I called out for her, but there was no answer. The house, as if in response, groaned loudly, and the lights flickered again, longer this time. When I turned back, I realized the others had stopped talking. Tom and Mark were staring at me as though waiting for something. And then it hit me. There was an odd silence that had descended over the house. The storm outside seemed to have muffled, leaving only the whispering wind behind. Tom looked at me, his eyes wide with concern, but as I moved toward him, he stood up abruptly. "I think I need some fresh air," he said. "I'll be right back." But like Sarah, Tom never returned. I searched the house for them, every room, every corner, but there was no sign of them. The hallway felt colder now, the walls seemed to close in around me, and that feeling of being watched grew stronger. It was as if something, or someone, was following me. I turned back to the dinner table, trying to shake the thought from my mind, but then I saw it. Mark. He was still sitting there, staring at me, but his eyes weren't the same. His gaze was hollow, distant, and his smile, it wasn't right. It wasn't the friendly smile I had seen before. I knew something was terribly wrong. I couldn't explain it, but the house had become alive with tension, and Mark's gaze was growing more unsettling by the second. I had to leave, but I couldn't. It was as though the house wouldn't let me. The sound of a photograph being picked up, and then the faint noise of glass being set down softly on a table. Then I saw it, an old photograph framed on the wall. It was black and white, showing a group of people standing in front of the very house I was in. I froze as I recognized the faces: Sarah, Tom, and Mark, all standing together, smiling. But there was something different about the photo. It was taken long ago, but there was one detail that stood out. In the background behind them was a man I didn't recognize. His eyes were hollow and cold, staring straight at me, and then I realized something more horrifying. The man in the photo was standing in the same spot where Mark had been sitting moments ago. I felt my heart stop. I looked back at Mark, and his expression had changed. His smile widened almost unnaturally, and I could hear him muttering something under his breath, something I couldn't understand. Suddenly, the air in the room shifted. The door to the kitchen slammed open on its own, and the temperature dropped. I rushed to the door, but when I opened it, there was nothing but darkness. No one was in the house anymore except for me. I finally left the house, but the storm outside wasn't the only thing that lingered. As I walked away, I realized that I was no longer in control. The house had swallowed my guests. No, they weren't missing. They had been taken, vanished into the walls, into the very fabric of the house itself. I returned to the photo later, hoping to find some answer, but the man's image was gone. The frame was empty, and all that was left was a dark, empty space where his face had been. And the last chilling detail, the photo from earlier. It was replaced with a new one, showing me standing alone in front of the same house. The caption below it simply read, "You're next." Story 5. The Shadow in the Attic. I had left the city behind. The noise, the crowds, the constant pressure, it all became too much. So I sought solace in the countryside, an old house that was supposed to offer peace. But when I arrived, the house felt different. It was quiet, yes, but that quietness was unsettling. The storm that arrived later that night seemed to amplify it, turning the house into something else entirely. I'd always imagined that living in the countryside would be peaceful, a break from everything. But the house, it felt like it was alive. I noticed it the moment I stepped inside. There was an attic that, at first, seemed harmless. But as the storm continued to pound the house, the creaks and groans of the attic felt different. It wasn't the house settling under the weight of the rain. It was something more, something moving. I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to the storm. But as the hours passed, the sounds coming from the attic grew louder. The banging, the whispering. It was as if someone was up there, waiting for me to listen. The storm raged on, but it wasn't just the storm I had to worry about anymore. The sounds from the attic grew worse. At first, I thought it was the wind, or maybe the old house shifting under the pressure of the rain. But this was something different. The bangs were rhythmic, deliberate. And then there were the whispers, so faint, so distant, I could hardly make out the words. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to know what was up there. I grabbed a flashlight and headed up the stairs, my footsteps slow, hesitant. The house creaked beneath me as if it were groaning under the weight of my intrusion. When I reached the attic door, it was ajar, creaking slightly as if something had been moving behind it. I hesitated, my hand resting on the doorknob, unsure if I should open it. But I did, and the moment I stepped inside, I felt it. The cold air, the heavy, suffocating presence of something watching. The attic was dusty, filled with old furniture covered in sheets, forgotten relics of another time. But it wasn't the dust or the furniture that made my skin crawl. It was the shadows. They were wrong. They didn't move like they should have. They shifted almost imperceptibly, but enough to make my heart race. I turned the flashlight toward the corner of the room, and that's when I saw it. A figure, no, a shadow, standing there. It was tall, too tall for any person I had ever seen. Its shape was vague, but its presence was undeniable. It stood still, unmoving, its head tilted as if it were studying me. The whispers seemed to come from it, from that shadow, but there was no mouth, no voice, just silence and the whispering. I didn't move. I couldn't. It was as though I was paralyzed, staring into the shadow. And then, just as I thought it might reach out for me, it disappeared, vanished, just like that. I didn't know what to think. Had I imagined it? Was it just the storm playing tricks on my mind? I moved closer, my hands shaking, my flashlight flickering in my grip. That's when I saw it, something that shouldn't have been there. A broken mirror, shattered on the floor. It had been placed there carefully, as though something wanted me to see it. The reflection of the attic in the broken shards wasn't what it should have been. It showed the shadow again. But this time it wasn't just standing there, it was reaching out toward me. I couldn't escape it. The shadow, the whispers, they were all tied to the house, to the attic. I turned to leave, but something stopped me, something I couldn't explain. The attic door slammed shut behind me with a force that shook the house. I spun around, heart racing, and that's when I saw it. The letter. It was old, yellowed with age, and its handwriting was scrawled in ink that seemed too dark, too vivid for something from this house. The letter was clear. The shadow follows you, always. It waits for the day when it will claim what is rightfully its. I could feel the weight of those words pressing down on me, suffocating me. I knew then. The shadow wasn't just an entity from the past. It was tied to me, to my bloodline. My family had been cursed, and it had been waiting for me to find it. The storm outside howled, but it was nothing compared to the storm inside me. I wasn't safe. No one in my family had been. I left the house that night, but the storm didn't stop. It never stopped. The shadow followed me, always. I could feel its presence even when I couldn't see it. And every time I think I've outrun it, it catches up. I've tried to find answers to get away, but I know the truth now. The attic, the shadow, it's always waiting for me. and when I close my eyes, I see it in the darkness, just beyond my sight, waiting for the day when it will claim me. Forever. The shadow in the attic. It's not just a ghost, not just a memory. It's part of me now, and it always will be. Story 6. The knock on the door. I had always preferred the quiet. That's why I moved out here, deep in the woods, where the world couldn't find me. The cabin was isolated, tucked away from the noise of everyday life. The storm that was rolling in that night seemed like it would be the perfect companion for a solitary evening. Just me, the fire, and the rain tapping against the roof. I settled in for the night, my book in hand, a hot cup of tea beside me, and the storm raging outside. Everything was as it should be, or so I thought. The knock echoed through the cabin, louder than the storm outside. I wasn't expecting anyone. Who could it be? I froze, my heart suddenly racing. I didn't know anyone out here. The nearest neighbor was miles away, and the storm made it impossible for anyone to be traveling this late. My mind raced as I stood up, unsure of what to do. Should I open the door? Could it be someone in need of help? Or was it just the storm playing tricks on me? I moved to the door, my hand trembling on the doorknob. I opened it, only to find nothing. No one was there. I looked around, expecting to see someone standing there, but there was nothing, just the heavy rain and the darkness beyond. My breath clouded in the cold air as I stepped outside for a moment, looking in all directions. Not a soul in sight. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was nothing, but I couldn't deny the chill creeping up my spine. I sat back down by the fire, trying to get back into my book, but my mind kept drifting. The storm outside was growing stronger, but that knock, so sudden, so sharp, it kept replaying in my mind. I don't know how long I sat there, lost in my own thoughts. The wind outside howled, but it wasn't until the third knock came that I snapped back to reality. This time it was louder. It rattled the door frame, making the whole cabin shudder. I rushed to the door again, opening it quickly this time. I expected to see someone there, maybe a traveler stranded by the storm. But no one. Just the same empty darkness, the wind and the rain. The chill in the air seemed to intensify as I stepped outside, scanning the horizon. Nothing. No sign of life. I shut the door with a little more force this time, locking it and sitting down by the fire. My heart was still racing, but I couldn't explain why. The storm outside continued its assault on the cabin, but the knocking, it didn't stop. The knocks had become a rhythm now, like a countdown. Every time I opened the door, the house would grow colder, the wind fiercer, and the knocking more urgent. I had to find out who or what was making those sounds. But every time I stepped outside, the world beyond the door seemed emptier, colder, as if the storm itself was closing in on me. I couldn't take it anymore. The knocking had become unbearable, louder, sharper. There was no way I could ignore it. This time I opened the door with a rush, hoping for some sort of explanation. But this time, there was something new. As I opened the door, I saw him. Standing there, just beyond the doorway, was a figure. A man drenched from the storm, his face obscured by the hood of his raincoat. I couldn't see his eyes, but I could feel them. They were on me, watching me from under the hood. I tried to speak, to ask who he was, but before I could, he stepped forward. He stepped inside, and the temperature in the room dropped sharply. The chill hit me like a wall. And then he spoke, his voice low, almost too quiet to hear above the storm. "I've been waiting for you." The wind howls again, but the figure inside the cabin doesn't seem to acknowledge it. His words hang in the air like a dark omen. I stood frozen in the doorway, unable to move. Who was this man? Why had he been knocking? And how had he known I was here? Suddenly, the figure disappears, vanishing as quickly as he had appeared. The door slams shut with a force that rattles the walls of the cabin. I didn't know what happened next. One minute he was there, standing in front of me, and the next, nothing. The house was quiet again. The storm outside continued its assault, but the man, he was gone. I went to check the door, but it was locked. It hadn't opened. And then I saw it. On the floor, just inside the door, was a piece of paper. I bent down, my hands shaking, and picked it up. It was a note written in ink that looked old, faded. I unfolded it, and the message was simple, but it chilled me to the bone. The knock came again, but this time I was not alone. Story 7. The Clock Strikes Midnight. I had heard the stories, of course. Everyone in town had. The old hotel at the edge of the forest, long abandoned, but now, surprisingly, open again for business. Rumors of its haunted past circled, whispers of guests who checked in but never checked out. But there was something that drew me in, something I couldn't explain. Perhaps it was the storm outside pushing me to seek shelter, or perhaps it was curiosity. Either way, I found myself standing in front of the heavy doors, ready to face whatever awaited inside. The hotel was cold, not just in temperature but in spirit, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes you feel like something's watching. The lobby was almost empty, save for a few flickering lamps casting long shadows on the walls. The check-in desk stood at the far end of the room, and I walked toward it, my footsteps echoing in the silence. It was then that I noticed it, an old clock hanging on the wall in the hallway, its pendulum swinging with a steady, rhythmic motion. It seemed out of place, like a relic from another era, yet it had a presence that made me uneasy. The clock ticked louder with each step I took toward the desk, its sound growing heavier in the air, as though it was drawing me in. I checked in, the clerk barely acknowledging me as I handed over my payment. As I turned to leave, the clerk muttered something under his breath, barely audible over the sound of the storm. Clock whispering eerily, "The clock, it never stops. Be careful." I didn't know what he meant, but his words sent a chill through me. I took my room key and ascended the staircase, my footsteps falling in time with the ticking of the clock. It was then that I realized it wasn't just the storm. The hotel was alive with something else, and I was not alone. I reached my room, closed the door behind me, and sat down by the window, watching the storm rage outside. The wind screamed as it rattled the glass, but inside the room, there was a silence that felt wrong, unnatural. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just the storm. But then I heard it. A voice, faint at first, but growing louder. I couldn't make out the words, but it was there. Someone or something speaking in the next room. I stood up, walking cautiously toward the door, trying to listen closer. The voice was coming from somewhere behind me now, from the mirror on the wall. I stood frozen in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. But something wasn't right. My face, it wasn't just mine anymore. The expression was twisted, contorted with something I couldn't explain. I stepped back, my breath catching in my throat, and then I saw them. In the reflection, there were people, guests from the past, dressed in old-fashioned clothing, their eyes empty and hollow. They were all staring at me, trapped in the glass, as if they were waiting for something, or someone. I wanted to turn away, but my feet wouldn't move. The air around me grew cold, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. I turned away from the mirror, my heart racing, but the voices continued. Faint at first, but then clearer, more distinct, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was as if the walls themselves were whispering to me, urging me to stay, to never leave. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the hotel itself was alive with some dark force. The storm outside had become a hurricane, and inside the hotel it felt as though time itself was warping, bending around the clock's ticking. The voices, they were speaking to me. And then they said it. You shouldn't have come. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a haunted hotel. It was a place where the past never left. And I had walked right into it. I rushed to the door, desperate to leave, but it wouldn't open. It was as if the hotel had locked me in. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to pull the door open, but it wouldn't budge. The clock was still ticking, faster now, as if urging me towards something. The air was thick, and the temperature had plummeted to a freezing chill. I could feel something cold on the back of my neck, a breath. No, not a breath. Something more. Something ancient. I turned around, and the guests in the mirror weren't there anymore, but standing in the doorway in front of the clock was a figure. A man, tall and thin, wearing an old suit, his face obscured by shadows. His eyes, I couldn't see them, but I could feel them, boring into me. He took a step forward, his voice raspy and hollow. You are one of us now. You've crossed into the past. There's no going back. I thought I had escaped. I thought I had broken free, but when I stepped outside the room, I realized something far worse. The hotel was no longer the same. The walls had shifted and the halls seemed to stretch endlessly, as if the very building had changed while I wasn't looking. I left the hotel that night, but I wasn't the same. The storm outside had stopped, but the clock had already struck midnight again. And the doors wouldn't open. The past had claimed me, and I knew I was stuck in it forever. The clock struck midnight again, and I was trapped forever. Story 8. The Faint Laughter. I needed a change. After everything that had happened, the stress, the noise, I thought maybe moving to an isolated house in the countryside would help me start fresh. This old place had been abandoned for years, but I was drawn to it. The land was quiet, the air clean. It seemed like the perfect escape from my chaotic life. As I stepped inside, the dust on the floor swirled up into the air, disturbed by my presence. The walls were covered with peeling wallpaper, the floors creaked underfoot, and everything felt still, almost lifeless. Yet, there was something about it, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. I wandered through the rooms, trying to get a feel for the place. It was the kind of house that seemed to hold secrets in every corner, each room feeling colder than the last. But it was when I first heard it, the laughter, that I knew something was wrong. At first I thought it was just the wind, or maybe I was imagining it. But the laughter, faint as it was, continued, and then it grew louder, faint giggles, followed by a chuckle that echoed through the halls. But no one was there. I was sure of it. I was alone. The laughter was faint at first, but as the night wore on, it grew louder, more distinct, more disturbing. It was coming from somewhere in the house, but no matter where I looked, I couldn't find the source. Every room I entered seemed to carry the sound with it, bouncing off the walls like some unseen force was following me. I tried to ignore it at first, telling myself it was just the house settling. But the laughter didn't stop. It was almost mocking. It was like a child's laughter, innocent at first, but there was something wrong about it, something twisted. I began to search the house, determined to find out what was going on. I checked every room, every closet, every space where someone could be hiding, but there was no one, nothing. And yet the laughter continued, growing louder and more chilling. It followed me, echoed off the walls, and no matter how hard I tried to find it, it was always just out of reach. I began to feel it, the sense that I wasn't alone. The air around me grew colder with every step, and the laughter seemed to wrap itself around me, as if it were a presence in the room. Something was in here, with me, and it was getting closer. I couldn't take it anymore. The laughter was driving me mad. I had to find the source. It was coming from somewhere deep within the house, from a part of it I hadn't yet explored. I opened the door and the laughter stopped. Silence. And then I saw it. A hidden room. It had been locked before, but now the door stood open, as though it had been waiting for me to find it. My heart raced as I stepped inside. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the walls covered in old yellowed paper. But there, in the center of the room, was an old broken mirror. Its glass was cracked, but it was still reflecting the dim light from the hallway. And then I saw it. The laughter was coming from the reflection. It wasn't just an echo anymore. The mirror was showing a room, but it wasn't my room. It was the same room I stood in, but with something different. In the reflection, there was a child, no older than 5, sitting in the corner, laughing to herself. But her face was pale, her eyes hollow, and her laughter, it wasn't right. It was deep, almost guttural, like something else was using her voice. I reached out, trying to touch the mirror. But before I could, the reflection changed. The child was gone, and in her place I saw something far worse, a dark figure watching me from the other side of the glass. It was tall, shrouded in shadow, and its eyes glowed with an unnatural light. The laughter stopped, but it wasn't over. I thought I could leave, that I could escape the house, but the doors wouldn't open. The house wouldn't let me go. The mirror, that cursed reflection, had trapped me in its past, and now I was a part of it. I turned to leave, but as I did, I saw something. No, someone, standing at the door, blocking my way. A woman, pale and lifeless. Her mouth stretched in a grotesque grin. Her laughter, my laughter, filled the room, echoing in my ears. I ran, but the house had already claimed me. It was too late. The laughter had stopped, but I couldn't leave. I was stuck in the house, just like the others before me. The house had swallowed me whole. Story 9. The Storm That Never Ended. I didn't know what drew me to this place. The village was small, tucked away from the world, and the storm never seemed to leave it. As I approached, the first thing I noticed was the weather. It had been raining since I arrived, and not just rain, a constant downpour unbroken by even a moment of calm. The thunder was relentless, echoing off the hills and shaking the air with its force. But the villagers, they didn't seem bothered by it. At first I thought it was just another village, maybe with a few oddities here and there. But as I made my way through the narrow streets, the eyes of the villagers caught mine. Strange, haunted eyes. The kind that told a story you weren't sure you wanted to hear. The first person I spoke to, an old man hunched over a cane, told me of the curse that hung over the village. The storm, he said, had never stopped. For as long as anyone could remember, the thunder never ceased. The rain never let up. It was a curse, they said, placed on the village for a terrible sin committed long ago. A sin no one dared speak of except in hushed tones. I wasn't one for superstitions. It was easy to dismiss the old man's words as the ramblings of someone who had lived too long in isolation. But there was something in the air here, something heavy. I could feel it. The storm, the whispers, the weight of something old and ancient that had been buried in the soil of this place. The first night was uneventful. I stayed in a small inn, tucked away in a corner of the village, surrounded by the sound of the relentless storm. I tried to sleep, but the wind never stopped, and the thunder seemed to shake the walls. It was as if the storm was alive, breathing down on the village, suffocating it. I tossed and turned, unable to ignore the sense of unease that settled in my bones. I woke up the next morning, but nothing had changed. The storm was still there, just as strong, just as loud. I ventured out to explore the village, hoping to learn more about its cursed past. But what I found only made things worse. As I wandered down the street, I saw people moving around, going about their business. But it was all wrong. Their eyes were glazed, distant, as though they weren't really there. And when I spoke to them, they didn't answer me directly. They spoke in riddles, as if they knew something I didn't. Something I wasn't supposed to know. It wasn't until I reached the town square that I saw something I couldn't ignore. A man stood under the large oak tree, his face turned upward, as if he were listening to something in the sky. I approached him, and as I did, I heard it. The whispers. They weren't in the air, they were coming from the man, from his mouth. But they weren't his words. "The storm will never end," he said, his voice low and hollow. "It's part of us now. We are the storm, and it is us." I tried to leave, but my legs wouldn't move. It was like the storm had a hold of me, pulling me back toward the center of the village, toward the heart of it all. I was trapped. I knew it now. The storm wasn't just outside, it was inside me, inside this place. Every step I took, the storm grew louder, closer. It was like the village had been swallowed whole by it, and I was the last piece. I had been drawn here by something beyond my understanding. I ran to the town square, desperate to find a way out, but the storm had taken over. The roads were flooded, the houses boarded up, and no matter how far I ran, the storm followed me. It was as though it had its own will, its own life. The wind screamed at me, the rain cutting through my skin, and the whispers grew louder, more urgent. I heard it then. A voice, clear and loud, cutting through the storm. It was a woman's voice, ancient, filled with sorrow and rage. The storm never stops, and neither will you. I looked up, and there she was, a figure, standing in the center of the square, her face obscured by the hood of her cloak. She stepped forward, and the air seemed to grow colder, the storm's intensity magnified by her presence. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in place, but the storm didn't stop. It's still here. The village is gone, consumed by the endless rain, the never-ending thunder. I'm trapped in it, just like they were, like the villagers before me. The storm never stopped, and now neither will I. The cycle is complete.